Welcome back to the JB Sports Podcast. Today is Monday, April 20th, and we are back for another pod. April 20th, also known as 420. If you celebrate, you celebrate. Have fun at it. I am not one of those, but it is a funny thing to at least mention because literally I was just looking at my phone at some point today while I was at work or something, and I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, today's that day. So if you do celebrate, go ahead, listen to the pod, and do what you want to do on a day such as today. But I wanted to make sure we get on the podcast today, and Jace, my co-host slash brother, is brother is not here today. I figured because we're going to be doing another podcast later on this week once the draft happens, reacting to such draft and everything, I figured I can at least come on, talk about some of the news that has been happening over the weekend and some things that have happened last week, and heck, today a few kind of things have popped up. So I want to at least get a pod out before the draft, kind of talk about some of the last little news and items before we get to that draft, and then leave everything that happens in the draft and around the draft for us to talk about on Friday or Saturday, whenever we can kind of get that in. But we are going to do another podcast this week, pretty much mainly focused on the draft and only the draft. So that's the plan. I'm sorry I didn't get a podcast in last week. I was just getting later on in the week last week. I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I got a little busy doing a couple other things because, I'm stupid and dumb and because here's the thing. I understood, I was so good for so long and so consistent on trying to get a podcast out every week, and then I've been really bad about it as of recently. And during the season, we're very good because there's something always happening, so you feel like you're going to get behind if you don't talk about it. But when it comes to the off season, at least this off season for me, it's been a little bit harder to get myself, not that I don't want a podcast, I really do, but I just want to make sure that there's stuff to talk about. It is not just me and Jay's kind of rambling on at each other talking about nothing, which again, some points can be very cool and fun of just sitting here shooting the shit and kind of going back and forth. But I do want to make sure that if we're on here doing a pod and kind of putting one out, that there is some good content to listen to for anybody that has been listening, because recent news, we've been getting a bunch of podcast downloads as of recently. We're over we're getting close to 8,000 downloads total for the podcast since its life cycle, and this is way more recently than over time. And I think over the last month or two, we've gotten over 1,000 downloads, and it's for all of those things, for anybody that has listened and has shared our podcast with other people to try to have them listen, I do appreciate you. And all those downloads are definitely helping, and hopefully we can just keep building and building upon that. So for that also being a reason, I think we had 300 downloads last week, and we didn't even put out a podcast last week. So for all of those reasons, I want to make sure I thank you guys too before I kind of get into the things I wanted to talk about today, that it's definitely appreciated. I'm happy to see that we have people out there that are willing to download our podcast and do the extra things of finding us and sharing and doing all of those things. We definitely love and appreciate it, because let's be honest, I don't really have a lot of things in my life that I'm super positive about, super not positive but secure about, right? I have my job. Do I like it? No. Do most people like their jobs? No. And for other things that I've talked about in my life, things that I have going on, when it comes to talking sports and when it comes to football and watching this stuff and really having an opinion on this stuff, this is the one thing that I can truly say that I not only am proud that I say I do, I really am. I really am. When I do this, I feel at most at home when I'm talking sports and doing stuff like this, and I feel that most secure too, because I'm just sitting here there's a lot of people that's willing to go out there and talk a lot of stuff about stuff they don't know about. I'm not one of those people. I'm not willing to sit there and lie or act like I know more than I know about things. And for me, being a normal simpleton, I think I'm relatively smart by comparison to a lot of people in the world. And again, there's a big spectrum out there, so I'm not trying to sit here and say I'm the smartest person in the world or anything. But I think I know a lot about a lot of different things. But do I ever feel secure enough about stuff to really go off and just talk about it without really having an extra thought. No, but sports is one of those things, which is why this stuff comes so naturally to me. So to anybody that gives the time of day to download our podcast, listen to our podcast, and just kind of listen to us talk dumb shit all the time, I would definitely appreciate you. And I'm going to keep putting in good work to hope I get better at this. Hope me and Jace get better at this, to where we can keep building this thing, and hopefully more and more people kind of get involved, and maybe get to a point where this is my job instead of having to go have a normal person job of a 9 to 5. Again, not that there's anything bad about that, but I just think that talking the sports thing is a lot more fun. So the more and more people get hooked onto this, and hopefully they like us doing what we're doing, maybe that can change our lives for the better, if it does end up being a big enough thing. But until then, I'm going to go ahead and sit here and keep doing the podcast as per normal, and that includes going on and doing this stuff on draft week, which honestly, I'm not going to lie, kind of is like Christmas to a sports fan, especially if you're an NFL football fan, because it's just a big week, man. There's so many things going on. You have a little bit of hope when you're talking about these teams that are going to be drafting here soon. You have like all the, especially if you're like a college football fan and an NFL fan, this is like the all-in-one extravaganza for you, because not only are you going to see the players, not maybe for your favorite teams, or maybe for all the bigger teams in college football that are big players and that you get to see go and transition into the NFL, which you think could be very talented or not very talented, because there's a lot of people out there that love to hate on players they have watched in college and don't think they're all that good. Again, I'm one of those people too. I have had plenty of players that I've looked at and been like, why are they looked at to be as good as they are, or going as high as they are in the draft if they're not that good? Again, there's been plenty of players like that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but just know there's plenty. And I'm more than happy to be the guy to be on the hater side if I don't think they're actually good. But you get that, and then you also get if you're an NFL fan, you have your team, and you get to have the hope that whatever player your team drafts can be the player that changes your franchise. Or, heck, let's be honest, it doesn't have to be like a total game changer like a quarterback, but sometimes it's a great corner or a great defensive pass rusher and offensive lineman to protect your quarterback, or wide receiver to help make big plays. So, like, this is like, for a football fan that loves both college and NFL, this is like a kid inside of a candy store type of week. And honestly, for a while now, I think for the last couple weeks, it's been like just a big old wait for this day that is coming up on Thursday. So without further ado, let me just go ahead and get to these news stories and stuff leading up to the draft, because let's be honest, it almost felt like it was going to be a bore leading up to this draft, because everybody knows who the first overall pick is going to be in Fernando Mendoza. And it didn't really seem like there wasn't a bunch of game-changing players. Like, there is some really good Hall of Fame potential players that are coming out in the draft this year, but they're coming out in spots that aren't necessarily viewed as high value positions. It's safety, it's linebacker, like inside linebacker. It's just not a lot of positions where you're like a lot of flash, and like even the quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, as much as people think he's going to be a good prospect and he's going to be the number 1 pick overall no matter what to the Raiders, like, not everybody's sitting here saying he's going to be the next Andrew Luck. Like, people are like, he's the best one that you can get, and he's probably the only quarterback worth being drafted in the first round. But because of that, he's kind of getting pushed up to where there's really no, like, would Fernando go number 1 in some of the past drafts that we've looked at as big quarterback drafts? Probably not. So there's just not a lot of intrigue around a bunch of different players in this draft, because the draft is not really looked at to be as, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to say it's not as exciting, but there's not as many flash players at big positions in this year's draft by comparison to others. So, again, quarterback being one of them, of course. So it's just, this is a draft for the real college, like real football nerds of both college and NFL football. And for me, no matter who I get excited no matter what, because not only for my team am I a nerd and I want to see the Pittsburgh Steelers go and draft a player that'll help our team and hopefully be a guy that'll change our team's fortunes in the near future. But I love watching all the storylines. It's like it's probably one of the last remaining reality television shows that's happening in real time, and that it just has all the drama in the world and everything. So I am definitely very excited about what's going to happen starting this Thursday, and I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of people that are feeling the exact same way. So I know I've been rambling all this first 10 minutes of this podcast, just kind of waxing poetic about sports and greatness and la 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 la. But I'm super excited about what's coming up. So let's get into the stories I want to talk about here. So this plan for today, I have the topics that I want to talk about for like news stories and stuff. I have 10 players that are coming up in this draft that I want to do best fits for. So I pretty much made it to where, hey, these are the teams that I feel like will be the best fit for these 10 players that I have picked. I don't want to go through a huge long list because it kind of gets boring, but I did pick 10 players that I think would be relatively interesting, just to kind of give like a, hey, in a fantasy world where you don't have to worry about the order or anything, where would these players be the best fits, or be I did mostly for the player, not necessarily for the team, but honestly, if it's a good fit for the player, it's going to end up being good for the team anyway. But I have the 10 players that I have will be best fits for team-wise. And then from there, I want to talk about a little bit of NBA, because have been watching like pretty much all of the NBA playoff games so far. And I will say, when the games are good and competitive, there's not much else better when it comes to playoff, like when it comes to real like tense moments in sports when you're talking about playoff basketball. It's been fun. I want to talk about the LaMelo thing that happened a couple weeks ago, because again, that was a pretty early on, not a couple weeks, but it was like early on last week, the LaMelo thing and the Hornets, and talk about all that. But I want to talk about how the series have gone so far in the first couple games that are, I think it's the first game that's really only happening. I think some of the second games are happening tonight in the NBA playoffs. But I'll leave that until the end, because I do really want to talk football here. So let's go ahead and get to it and not have me ramble on anymore about what I plan on doing. So let's start with the topics that I want to go through first. Houston Texans, I think this is the middle of last week. Houston Texans signed defensive end Will Anderson to a 3-year, $150 million extension, making him the highest paid non-QB in NFL history. Honestly, I think it's awesome, the fact that they were able to pay him. I think they just said that they were going to give him his 5th-year option. I think that was announced, that not only for him, but for CJ Stroud as well, that they're doing the 5th-year options on both of those players. That the 5th year isn't going into this year, but it would be for next year, right? But here's what I'll say. I think everybody kind of knew when they said that they were going to do so, that you have to start, the earlier you get the deals done, the better your off you're going to be, because it only gets more and more expensive. And the way I look at it is that with CJ not necessarily playing his best at the end of last season in the playoffs, and Will Anderson being literally at his best in the playoffs, and really he was going on a tear in the first round of the playoffs, and heck, the end of the season going into the first round. What is it? First and second round when they beat the Steelers and then ended up losing to the Patriots. Will Anderson was awesome. And people already look at him as like one of the best defensive players in football, if not the best defensive player in football, for the amount of madness. I mean, maybe not because Myles Garrett exists, because Myles Garrett did, he did obtain the sack record last year. So maybe Myles Garrett notwithstanding. But outside of him, it's looked at as Will Anderson being one of those top guys. So Will Anderson, he's definitely earned the money that he's getting. He's an awesome player. And honestly, when it comes to this, is like, well, like I said before, it only gets more expensive. And if you sit there and wait on Will Anderson, it's only going to get more and more and more. And getting it done now just makes it a lot easier for them. And now the only thing they have to wait for is hope that CJ Stroud kind of turns around and he turns into the quarterback that, not turns into, because I think he already showed in his first year that he can be a guy that can lead that team to great heights. And I think he's done that all 3 years. They've been to the playoffs all 3 years that he's been the starter. And they're just hoping that the last couple of games that he experienced in this past season in the playoffs aren't going to be a referendum on what he's going to be the rest of his career, and that he can just kind of turn it around and go back to being that player that he was that first year where he was tearing up the NFL. And again, some of those things that have to go on him when it comes to things he has to fix on his own. But I also think the Texans have to give him a little bit of help by getting him a better offensive line and just kind of, and heck, let's be honest, having healthy players around him, because there's been so many guys injured, running backs, wide receivers going down like flies, where like he hasn't had consistency in that way. On top of the fact that offensive coordinator, like they had an offensive coordinator change from 2 seasons ago going into this past season that did not look like it was working out all that well to begin. And then by the end of the season, it looked like it was getting better up until the playoff games where everything just kind of went haywire for CJ. So Houston, I think, made a great decision by signing Will Anderson, because that will, they already know that he's going to be their guy for their foreseeable future. So signing him now is definitely a huge deal, and getting the money that he's getting, again, right now sounds very expensive. The fact they're giving him that much money, I think they're like $150 million. And I think over 125 of it's fully guaranteed. So, $130 million of that is fully guaranteed. So, like, it sounds like a lot of money now, but over the next 2-3 years, like, the defensive ends will only just stack on top of each other, getting more and more and more money. So, 2 years from now, that money you gave Will Anderson may just look like chump change based off of what guys will end up being paid in front of him, because it just keeps stacking on top of each other. Now it's my turn to get paid the highest amount if you're a player of that caliber. So signing Will Anderson to that deal is a very good idea for the Houston Texans, and I have no bad things to say about that whatsoever. And now their big hope is that CJ Stroud turns into the player he ends up being the player they need him, and that he has shown that he can be consistently. And from there, once you have your great quarterback and your great pass rusher, you can kind of build the team out from there, because you have 2 stalwart players on both sides of the football, a la Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones. Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones, like that, like having that combination of great quarterback, great pass rusher for a football team are great building blocks to building out a really good NFL football team. So hopefully that'll work out for them. Work out for CJ and work out for the Houston Texans, that they can kind of have those building blocks figured out, so you can kind of build out the team from there. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the Giants. They made huge news over the weekend. I think this is on Saturday when the news broke. I was with Jason at the time, so which kind of add a little bit of hot fire onto this. The Giants traded defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence to the Cincinnati Bengals for the 10th pick overall in this Thursday's draft. And then coming off of that, I think either the day after or 2 days after, I think it was the day after, I think it was yesterday, the news came out that the Bengals were signing Lawrence to a 1-year, $28 million extension, keeping him there for at least 3 years. And this is, okay, so which side do I want to start with this? So let's start from the Giants side here, and then I'll get to the Bengals. For the Giants, this makes all the sense in the world, because I remember talking about this weeks ago where the news came out that Dexter Lawrence had formally asked for the trade because he was looking for an extension. The Giants weren't willing to give it to him, or it was over the last couple of years he was looking for an extension. They weren't willing to give it to him, for whether the amount of money or what the time framing, who knows, whatever that the issues were there. But it got to a point where Dexter Lawrence was not happy with it anymore, and he wanted to get traded. And this offseason, where he asked for such a trade, you have a new head coach coming in John Harbaugh. And I think they asked Harbaugh a couple weeks ago about Dexter Lawrence, and Harbaugh waxed poetic about not only is he a building block for our team, he's like a middle. I forget what he specifically called him. It was kind of weird the way he said it. But he pretty much made it very clear that, hey, Dexter Lawrence is a big pillar to our success as a football team. Sorry, I'm a little bit English is hard sometimes. And we want to keep him and want to make sure we pay him and do all of that. But the rumblings underneath the the main headlines were that things weren't going well there, and some of the contact between Dexter Lawrence and the organization had already soured before John Harbaugh even got there. And with all of that, it just made it very clear that Dexter Lawrence did not feel comfortable with the organization there, whether John Harbaugh was involved or not. And because of that, Dexter Lawrence wanted out, and it didn't matter how much money the Giants would come. Because again, think about the money that the Cincinnati Bengals gave him. $28 million and a lot for one of the best defensive tackles in football. Like, Dexter Lawrence is a top 5 for sure, if not, like, I think he's probably like a top 2 defensive tackle for what he does in the NFL. I think he's a top 2 defensive tackle, if not number 1. But I don't think they're going to find anybody out there that's going to say he is not at least a top 5 defensive tackle. So the money that the Bengals gave him, like, the Giants could have easily paid him that type of extension without much of an issue. A 1-year extension for $28 million is not necessarily a lot for a player of that caliber. But I think it was more about the things outside of money that really pushed Dexter Lawrence to really want to go down this route and be traded away from the Giants. And I think the Bengals kind of were I'm not going to sit here and say that they were the beneficiaries of it, because I do think they overpaid. But before I get to that, let me just get to the Giants now, because now, without Dexter Lawrence there, they have gotten rid of, he is their best defensive lineman on that team, but they do have a bunch of pass rushers on that team that you have to worry about. And yes, are you going to have to kind of rebuild and like maybe put in new players to kind of fit that mold? Yes, for sure. But I think the Giants feel like because they don't have to pay him that extra money, and with the players that they have in their roster, they feel pretty confident that they can. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to be able to replace that production 1-for-1, losing Dexter Lawrence from that team. But they have made it clear that, hey, we can survive it and make sure that we're still going to be able to be a team to be on the rise, even without Dexter Lawrence on that team. So what do they get for making that change and now not having Dexter Lawrence? They now have an extra top 10 pick. Extra top 10 pick. Now, not only do they have the number 5 pick in this upcoming draft on Thursday, they now have the 10th pick overall as well, which is what that was where the Bengals sat in the first round. And so now the Giants have 2 top 10 picks. And let's be honest, John Harbaugh is one of the better coaches in the NFL. So the idea that, like, you're going to end up being a much better football team after this year when John Harbaugh gets his hands on this team and kind of mold them to what a real NFL football team looks like. And I think if Jackson Dart keeps taking steps forward, and the offense, like, they're going to get Malik Neighbors back, and he can come back healthy and play very good football this season. On top of the fact they're going to be having much better coaching than what they've been dealing with over the last few years, there's not going to be many times with John Harbaugh as your coach that you're going to have a top 10 pick at all, let alone having 2 top 10 picks, 2 picks in the top 10. And I think with that being the case, I think that made it, especially with Dexter Lawrence already making it very clear he didn't want to be there. Once the Bengals came through with an over-the-top offer of just straight up giving a 10th overall pick for Dexter Lawrence, I think it made it like it was almost a deal that the Giants couldn't refuse at that point. And now because of that, they get to turn one defensive player into now potentially having 2 impact players on your team to start from year 1 and hopefully help your team take a big step forward going into next season. So I just think from the Giants' perspective is that they took a player that already did not want to be there, that everybody in the NFL knew they would not want to play for the Giants, and they were able to turn that into a top 10 pick overall in this upcoming draft. I think the Giants came out like gangbusters. I think they ran to the fax machine to make sure they got that whole thing faxed off and got the trade done and ready to go. Because I just think that overall, I think Cincinnati way overpaid, because not only did they have to give up that 10th pick overall, but then they had to sign him to the extension again. This extension really wasn't all that steep and wasn't crazy expensive, but the fact that you had to sign him on top of trading for him, it just felt like they overpaid a lot. They should not have like given up a top 10. I think they probably could have given up a second and something else, but giving up the 10th pick overall, I just feel like is a little bit steep. Even I think still Dexter Lawrence is still one of the best defensive tackles in football, but I just feel like it just felt a little rich to me, even if I can't put it into words how exactly I feel that is the case. I just feel like on first blush, you just say, hey, Dexter Lawrence for a top 10 pick. I think most people would look at it like, I get it, but it seems like a lot. So I think the Giants are going to be able to make, no matter what they do, whether they get 2 defensive players or if they make a defensive and an offensive player, I think they're going to be able to get 2 impact players to add to that team, and I feel like that'll be a very big help to supercharge that rebuild for the Giants that John Harbaugh is now in charge of. So now, let's go ahead and get to the Bengals side of this, which is as to why I think this all happened and what I truly feel about the deal in general from the Bengals' point of view. I think this move was incredibly desperate by the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'll get to what Jace thought here in a bit, but I want to give my thoughts first on this. I think this was an incredibly desperate move by the Bengals to make this move and get Dexter Lawrence in this. I just think it was incredibly desperate, and I feel like they overpaid for getting him. And again, he is an awesome player, top 5 defensive tackle in football. He's going to be able to help them right away, and I feel like this does fill a need for their biggest weakness on that defensive side of the football. It is stopping the run, and the run gashed them all year last year, and it's been gashing them for years. They have not really been able to stop the run for a while on that team. So he feels a need to where even if they were to have that 10th pick overall, they're going to have to draft somebody that they hope they can turn into a great player to help them out long term. And I just think that they're using that 10th pick and sending it away for a veteran player that is, and he's only 28 years old. He'll be 29 during the season. So, and you're going to get at least 3 years of prime Dexter Lawrence to where you don't have to worry about if that player is going to translate or going to build them up. This player has already proven that he can do it in the NFL and do it at a very high level. Again, he didn't necessarily have a great year last year, but I do think some of the issues with the organization have to be taken into account in that. And we're never truly going to know everything that goes on with that organization and how much things weren't going well to make him potentially not play as well as he probably could have. But I just think that with what he has shown in the NFL, I just feel like you have to give him the benefit of the doubt that now in a situation where he feels like he's been paid, he's wanted, and all of those, that he's going to be able to take a big jump and play a lot better next year for the Cincinnati Bengals. And the way I look at it is, like I said, the Bengals were incredibly desperate. And I have to give a little bit of a thought to why the Bengals would make this move. Because the Bengals are not known as an incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for? Aggressive organization when it comes to trading and going to get pieces to add to their team right away and play, rather than going and getting the cheap talent that the draft offers you a chance to go get. I would say for a long time, the Bengals is like one of those organizations that for a long time that doesn't really play all that aggressive. They act like they don't make a lot of money and things like that. And heck, even with Joe Burrow on their team for a while, like think about the Trey Hendrickson thing. Like they kept pushing the Trey Hendrickson, they kept kicking that can down the road over and over and over again because they didn't want to pay the guy, up until the point where they can't do it anymore. And he walks to go play with the Baltimore Ravens, and now you're going to have to deal with him twice a year, and he's going to come sack your quarterback because you pissed him off over the last few years and wouldn't pay the guy. And their whole plan with the Hendrickson thing was keep kicking the can down the road and then get Shamar Stewart in last year's draft and hope he can be the heir apparent to Hendrickson. And that didn't happen because Shamar Stewart was not good at all at football. And that has been their philosophy for so long, and now it seems like they're totally changing it up this time around and giving up their top 10 pick that they could have potentially get one of the defensive star Buckeyes from Ohio State, or they could have got one of the other, at their 10th spot overall, they could have gotten just the best defensive player available, and it probably would have helped their team. Probably outside of corner, because I think corner, there isn't like a superstar corner in this year's draft, I don't think. I think Mansour Delane is probably looked at as like the best one, but I think he has his issues straight line speed-wise. I think there is no Sauce Gardner they were going to get at the 10th pick overall that'll help out their team as of right now. And even at that 10th spot, I don't think there was a defensive tackle that they looked at and was going to be worth that 10th pick overall in general. So if you weren't going to go offense, or you're not going to go offensive line, I don't think the Bengals necessarily need to draft another first-round offensive lineman. That there weren't a lot of picks for them to go, there weren't a lot of players for them to go get at this spot to where they thought was going to be able to help their team right away, which is why I think it made very much sense for them to go just turn that 10th pick overall into Dexter Lawrence that they will know will help them right away for the next 2, 3, 4 years throughout the rest of that guy's prime. And when I saw this stat that the last time the Bengals, I think it was a stat talking about the last time the Bengals had traded away their first round pick. Traded their first round pick. So this is the first time the Bengals have traded away their first round pick since 1989. So they've, like, the Bengals in general as a business practice for a long time have pretty much made it clear that they're going to use their own first round pick every single year no matter what. And now this year, going into another season of Joe Burrow, where I do think that maybe Joe Burrow made it very clear that they have to take a real step forward defensively, and or maybe he'll be willing to go outside the team and maybe try to go look for another potential place for him to spend the rest of his career because of a lack of support by the organization to really turn that team into a winner, like I think Joe Burrow is worthy of, because he's like one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So now, looking at this spot where now the Bengals have made an incredibly aggressive move to get one of the best defensive players in football, especially one of the best defensive tackles in football, that now I think they're kind of pushing things to a different level where they are really trying to be aggressive and to really fix one of their biggest weaknesses in that team, where there wasn't an obvious guy to draft with that 10th overall pick to fix it, right? And I looked at it and I was so down on it when I first started, and the more and more I thought about it, the more I have to kind of give the Bengals some credit that they were able to make an aggressive move, even if it is not guaranteed to work. Right? It's safer. It is, you get to kind of sleep better at night if you go and draft a young player that you have the hope and the potential of that player potentially becoming their best selves for your team, to where you can kind of have them be that guy for you, right? But I think it's way more aggressive and way scarier to kind of give away that lottery ticket opportunity that you have at that 10th pick overall to go get an already, heck, Dexter Lawrence is already an established player. I'm not saying he is not, like, he is a great player in his own right, but you've already seen what that player is at his best, and it's like that lottery ticket, even with Dexter Lawrence making good on what he was supposed to be when he got drafted and what he was supposed to be in the NFL, he's made good on that. And I think the Bengals gave up a little bit of that chance to be on the ground floor with a player and build them up to turn them into the player that'll help them for a long time. And you're giving up a little bit of that to kind of get a more already established starter in the NFL that has a better chance of helping you right away. And it's just, I have to give them credit that they were able to make this move, because I just feel like it is aggressive. It is a little bit scary, but they made the move because maybe they finally got it through their thick skulls that, like, hey, if we keep fucking around, Joe Burrow will make us find out, and he will ask for a trade, and he will get out of town. So I have to give them a little bit more credit that they're willing to make a drastic move, even if it's not guaranteed to work. And that's the part where I have to give them a little bit of credit, because, heck, even me as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, like, the Steelers have played it aggressive at points. I think that was in when was that year that Ben got hurt and then we traded our first round pick away for Minkah Fitzpatrick? I think that was in. Let me see here. When trade for Minkah. I think that was in like 2017, 2019. So like even the Steelers got aggressive at a point very recently and traded away their first round pick to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. Again, totally different can of worms because they traded for him when Ben had already gotten hurt that season, and there was no quarterback to rely upon to kind of think you're going to be a real Super Bowl contender. But even the Steelers got aggressive and like, hey, we can add a great player to our defense and make us a lot better. And even they have done it more recently than the Bengals up until, what was that? Saturday, when the Bengals have finally decided to make a move that is not fully guaranteed to work. And by work, I'm not saying that there's a chance that Dexter Lawrence won't be a great player for them, but it's not guaranteed to work as in get them a championship. Like this move alone is not guaranteeing the Bengals to get back to where their defense is okay, and Joe Burrow can just be the great player that he is and lead you to wins. And because of that, that's where I think it gets a little bit scary, because I think Dexter Lawrence will do what he has to do, but it's whether they can build that defense around him to get to a level to where that defense won't be the reason why the Bengals Joe Burrow can't get into the playoffs and put themselves in positions to win those type of games late in the season. That's where I think the Bengals have to be given a tad bit of credit here, because I've always been the first person to talk about how unserious of a franchise the Bengals are and how much I think they never take a chance on actually just going for it. Even when they have a player of Joe Burrow's talents, I feel like I've been on the record on this podcast talking about how they're wasting what great years of Joe Burrow because they keep fucking around. So if I'm going to be the person to be talking about how they're wasting time and not doing the things they need to do to get after it, then I have to be one of the first people to give them credit for making a move that, is incredibly aggressive, but not guaranteed to get them to their ultimate goal. But in the interim, I do think Dexter Lawrence will make them a much better defense, because he literally fits the single biggest need for that defense is stopping the run, especially down the middle of the defense. And he is going to eat up space in the middle of that defensive line to where, and heck, he'll get after the quarterback a little bit too, because I think he can rush the passer a bit when he's not covering on running plays. I feel like he can do a lot of things that'll help out your defense a ton. And their secondary isn't all that bad. They've put some real draft capital into that secondary. And are they a little thin at linebacker? Yeah, probably. But again, they're not. They were not going to get Sonny Styles in this year's draft, which I think is another reason why they thought that they weren't going to be able to, get a guy of that caliber at the 10th pick overall, which is why it made it easier to trade away that pick. So I just think, all in all, I have to give the Bengals a lot of credit. So let me kind of turn this to what I thought what Jay said when he heard about this trade, because I looked it up and then I had to tell him while we were out about this trade, and his first reaction, he wasn't necessarily thrilled, because his thoughts on this year's draft is that he wanted the Bengals to pretty much take the best defensive player available at the spot that they were at. And he was hoping for either a Sonny Styles, which wasn't going to happen based off what he did in the combine, or he was hoping for Caleb Downs to fall to them, which was a possibility, but it's not very likely. At least for me, at least what I don't think. I am a little bit biased in this fact because of how great Sonny has been for the Buckeyes. But I think all in all, most people were thinking that Caleb Downs is probably going to go before 10. It's like he probably won't be there by the time the 10th pick comes up. So with that being the case, like that, even if I were to tell him that, there is still a chance based off of how things go. Because again, we never know what's going to happen in the draft. Heck, this upcoming draft, the only thing that's a guarantee is that Fernando Mendoza is being picked at number 1 overall. But outside of that, we don't have a bunch of guarantees about how this thing is going to go. So it was going to be hard for me in the moment talking to Jace about it, be able to say, hey, those guys aren't going to fall to you at all. You should be more confident about what this is, about how much of a need this fills for you. So it'd be very hard pressed for me to like try to make that point to him in that moment, right? But I think he started off a little bit negative, and then that news on Saturday hadn't came out about the actual signing yet of having Dexter Lawrence for now 3 years instead of the final 2 years of his current deal. Which again, in like past years, the Bengals have not necessarily they have not done things business-wise that would make you believe that they were going to do the right thing, and once they trade for a guy that was looking for a new contract, to then not give him such contract and just say, hey, we're just going to hold on to you for these next 2 years and we'll figure it out at some point. They've made some moves in the past that are very similar to, what it would have looked like if they hadn't signed, if like Dexter Lawrence wasn't going to be signed. They were just like, hey, we have him for 2 years. Why do we need to give you an extension for anything, right? So without that news coming out, because that news didn't come out until the day after, Jace is like, hey, if we sign him to an extension, I think it'll be a very good deal, but he wasn't necessarily confident that was going to happen. And the more he thought about it, he's like, Dexter Lawrence is a great player, and I think he fixes like one of the biggest issues on our defense. Is it going to make our defense great? Probably not, but I think it does. He totally believed that it was going to help in like one of the biggest areas of concern based off the last couple years. And so like the more he thought about it, the better he felt about it. And then I sent him the news yesterday about the signing that they got him, now have him for 3 years, which will take the Bengals mostly through that guy's prime. I think he's 28 now. He'll end up being 29 during the season, but they'll have him for the next 3 seasons. That's through most of the guy's prime. And I feel like, and it's not necessarily guaranteed that over the next 3 years, he'll then just fall off a cliff because of the type of player he is. He's just a big body. He's not one of those guys that relies on supreme athleticism. So he may actually age a little bit better as time goes along because he's not necessarily a high-flying defensive tackle. He's more of a space eater that really helps in the run game, which is like kind of gives you an opportunity potentially for him to kind of be better for longer because of the type of player that he is. So I just think all in all, with how things look, I feel very good about what the Bengals did, even though it potentially takes away the lottery ticket of the Bengals getting a young, cheap player that can be an all-pro for them for long term, which again is not necessarily a guarantee based off how drafts go, because draft never goes perfect to plan, right? So I just think maybe they gave up a little bit of that wonder, and I do feel bad for Jace that now in the first round of the draft, he has nothing to look forward to because the Bengals don't have a first-round pick now. Like, that's the part I feel bad for Jace for. I feel bad that he doesn't get to have that wonder of what can that lottery ticket get me, because the lottery ticket's been used on somebody else. But again, the 10th pick overall for one of the best defensive tackles in football, I feel like is still very good, but I just feel like it doesn't hit the same as getting that da-na-na-na, and then having Roger Goodell go up and announcing the player and then getting super excited or super sad based off of whatever player you did or did not want them to draft. So that's the part I feel a little bit bad for Jace for. But I think when it comes to actual football on the field, I think this is a very good move for everybody involved. And I do think that for Joe Burrow that is looking forward to an instant impact on the defense side of the football to make sure that Joe Burrow doesn't have to score 40 points every week to win football games, getting Dexter Lawrence from that football team is a huge deal towards making it to where Joe Burrow doesn't have to be perfect. And again, Joe Burrow is very close to perfect a lot of the time, but it's just on those bad days where he throws a couple picks, you would like for the defense to be able to help out a little bit when he's not necessarily at his tip-top form at all times. And adding a player like Dexter Lawrence, I think, is a huge step towards that. And I feel like Joe Burrow is a very happy man that the Bengals managed to make a move like this, because I honestly did not have any hope that they would ever make an aggressive move like this at all. Let's go ahead and get on to the next story here. 49ers signed offensive tackle Trent Williams to a 2-year, $50 million extension that keeps him there through the 2027 season. And this is how old is Trent? I think Trent Williams is 38 years old. Let me make sure I'm not crazy here. Trent Williams, he's 38 now, I believe. He's 37. So he's 37 as of right now. This will take him through his year 39 season, so 2 years from now. And he, even at his advanced stage, advanced is probably a little bit crazy to say, but even at his older age, he's still one of the best left tackles in the NFL, and he's proved that on the field, right? But this, I'm not totally, like, again, $50 million, $25 million a year. I don't think that's the highest for an offensive tackle, right? Top left tackle contracts in the NFL. No, is that the top? No, Laramie Tunsil has the highest contract right now. He has an average of $30 million a year. Okay. So Laramie Tunsil's the highest one per year at $30 million. Trent Williams sitting at around 27. Based off of these last couple years that he has left of his contract. So it's not at the tippity top, but it's still not necessarily the most expensive out there. He's $3 million off. But here's my issue. How many games did Trent Williams play last year? Trent Williams. Let's get to the Pro Football Reference. I just want to make sure I get the amount of games right, because I do feel like he didn't play a lot of games last year. He played 16 games. Games started 16. Did he... Let's see here. 2025. What games did he play? Offensive snaps. No, he played most of last season. Am I crazy? Was it the year before he didn't play a lot? Yeah, so the year before he didn't play a lot. He didn't. So last year he played 16 games, and then the year before he missed weeks 11 through 17. Okay, so last year he played all of his games. Because my main thing with Trent Williams is that he's older, right? It is what it is, and he is still proven when he's out there on the football field, even last year, he's still one of the best left tackles out there, and there hasn't been a little bit of a fall off when it comes to the player that he is. But again, he started off at such a high level that even with some fall off, he's still considered one of the best left tackles out there, even at 37 years old. But my only problem is that they keep kicking that can down the road, and they have who knows whether they actually have a left tackle ready to go behind him if there's an injury or something like that. But that is something you have to think about with the age that he's at, and how long you think he can be that tip-top form when it comes to health-wise form of version of Trent Williams. Like, that health is what I think I worry about more than the actual play on the football field, because I think he's proven it for so long that he knows what he's doing out there, and he's very skilled at the job that he does on the football field. But it's just the health factor is what kind of makes me pause a little bit by giving him the money they're giving him. And it's just, he's just older, man. And one injury on that, because again, he is the best offensive lineman on that team by a landslide. And if he goes off of that, if he doesn't play, that line takes a huge step back because he isn't there. But now with the money they're giving him, they're not going to go, like, maybe they go and pick up a tackle to be either the right tackle or be the tackle in waiting for if that injury does happen. But if they don't, or if they don't have an answer in-house on what happens if Trent Williams gets hurt, like, that's a huge deal. In giving a guy like that $25 million a year over the next 2 years through his age 38 and 39 season, that's a potential issue the way I look at it. And again, nobody can necessarily guarantee that injuries will or won't happen, but I think that the older you get in the sport of NFL football, the more likely it is to potentially happen. And he is at an age where injuries are going to be very likely to happen. And part of it's luck, but it's just like the older you get, the more likely the luck is to kind of end up on the bad side of it for you. And again, he's still a very talented player, and he's still awesome even at 37, 38 years old, but it's just, can the injuries hold up to where that money is well spent? And that's the question that I have about this. And because again, if he's on the football field, he's one of the best left tackles out there. I'm totally able to agree with that part. But it's just, can you guarantee me that he's going to play all the games necessary over these next couple of years? That's where the question comes in. Next story I want to talk about. The Cowboys signed kicker Brandon Aubrey to a 4-year deal, averaging $7 million a year with $20 million in guarantees. He's the best kicker in the NFL. I think he has the highest contract for a kicker in NFL history with having $7 million a year on his contract. So that is a big deal for the Cowboys, because outside of Dak Prescott and that offense doing what they're supposed to do, the next biggest weapon for that team, I would say Dak Prescott, the wide receivers, of course, but the next biggest weapon is Brandon Aubrey. He makes their job for the offense so much easier, especially in crunch time. Is that, imagine being down 1 point or 2 points, or being down a field goal with not a lot of time left. Instead of having to go, 60 yards down the field, you're starting to feel comfortable at around 50, 51, 52, 53 yards down the field, because of how almost money Brandon Aubrey has been over the past few years, kicking long field goals. Again, the accuracy isn't always there, but they do challenge him to hit some very long ones from very far away. That's going to impact the accuracy in general. But I just think that the fact that they trust him to hit some of these long field goals that he's been hitting over the past few years is definitely a huge deal. And because of that, it just makes it very imperative that you keep him in the fold for years to come, especially at his age. That's a weapon for your team you just can't get rid of. And on top of the fact you're still kind of rebuilding your defense, and hopefully this draft will kind of help them take steps in that fact. But until that defense gets to a point where you feel confident in it, having a kicker that you feel like you can get some big late field goals with is going to be a huge deal. Because it's not like you're going to be able to rely on your defense to get any stops anytime soon. So having a kicker you can rely upon, like Brandon Aubrey, where he'll be able to hit some long kicks, but in shorter distances, he's a lot more accurate and everything. So that's a weapon in and of itself. And having that for the Dallas Cowboys is definitely going to be a huge deal. So good job for them getting that deal done with Brandon Aubrey, because, again, he's the second biggest weapon for that team. Sorry, I can't say second, because they do have Dak Prescott, George Pickens, and CeeDee Lamb. But outside of those three players, I think Brandon Aubrey is the next most important player on that football team right now. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. I really don't. So good on them to get that deal done with Aubrey, and Aubrey's going to be a very rich kicker in the NFL. Very good for him. Next story that I wanted to talk about. It does seem real. The rumored deal between the Eagles and the Patriots for A.J. Brown seemed to be happening. I think the news, it broke again today. I think Adam Schefter came out with a tweet that pretty much said, hey, the rumored deal that everybody was talking about happening post June 1st between the Eagles and the Patriots is definitely going to happen, but that the deal hasn't been agreed to as of yet. So pretty much the news is that, hey, the rumored deal isn't necessarily agreed to, because it really technically can't be until after it's done post June 1st, because the Eagles are trying to save money on the dead cap hit that it would hit their team with. So until that day happens where they can make the deal official, even if they have the deal done right now, they would never be able to tell anybody, because they're trying to push that thing off until after June 1st, so they don't have such a big cap hit onto their such a big dead cap hit on their cap. So it's almost like a reaffirming that, because I remember talking about this over a month ago, right? Because the rumblings were kind of coming out that this deal is potentially going to happen, but if it did happen, it was going to be after June 1st, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole and was like, hey, why would you, and all of that. And I don't necessarily want to go down that road once again, as to explain why I think some of those dynamics are going on. But I think it is definitely imperative that, like, definitely important that it has now been pretty much reconfirmed. Because I don't think Adam Schefter's coming out and saying, like, giving new life to this story unless he has some real news that this deal is definitely going to happen. Again, the deal has to be agreed to, and we've all seen the whole thing with Max Crosby where the deal's agreed to and then it isn't because of a failed physical from one side of the teams that maybe didn't want the deal to happen after they had a little bit of an opportunity to kind of rethink it. So, like, that part still has to be figured out, but it does seem like there is some real momentum to this deal actually ended up happening. And I think for all parties involved, I think the Eagles are done with A.J. Brown and all the antics. I think A.J. Brown's done with the Eagles and all the antics they've been doing, trying to protect Jalen Hurts and the offense and kind of making him look like the bad guy for so long, up until the point where he did become the bad guy because he couldn't keep his own emotions in check, and like he starts doing things outside of his character and like doing things that make him look like the issue, when for so long he was just the truth teller for that team that nobody else wanted to be. And I think this helps the Patriots to where, because like, hey, they need a number one receiver to help out their young quarterback in Drake May. And I think A.J. Brown can be that big security blanket wide receiver one that they've been looking for. And heck, they did a good job with Diggs last year as their number one corner. As their number one wide receiver. But A.J. Brown's a much better wide receiver than Diggs at this point. And being able to add A.J. Brown, because he's a big body and because he still has some really good speed, he can get you the big play, he can get you slants. Like, he opens up your offense to so many different possibilities, on top of the fact that A.J. Brown already has dealt with Mike Vrabel, the head coach for that team before, because Mike Vrabel was the head coach at Tennessee when A.J. Brown was at Tennessee, the team he originally got drafted to. So like it's already so much synergy there that I think it'll be a very easy transition from A.J. Brown to go from the Eagles that have been pretty much a dumpster fire offensively, to where I think he'll be a lot more comfortable playing with the Patriots, playing with I would say probably a much better passer of the football as of right now than Jalen Hurts, at least a more consistent passer again. He's only done it over one season. He has to do it for more years than just one season for me to say for sure he's better than Jalen Hurts. But again, from what I've seen so far, I think I have a tad more confidence that Drake May can stay on his trajectory rather than whatever the fuck is going on with Jalen Hurts and his accuracies and his unwillingness to throw in the middle of the field and all of that other shit. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole once again. But I just think all in all, this move would be better for everybody involved. And it just sucks that all of this has happened, because when things look good for the Eagles, it looks so good and it looks so dominant. And now that this is like one of those first things of a team kind of getting pieced apart by different things happening. And if this happens, like, the Eagles won't be the same team as they were before. Like, the Eagles are not going to come out of this being a better football team without A.J. Brown on it. And heck, just because A.J. Brown leaves, like, not only losing the talent that he is, but that offense is still going to be an issue that people are going to have to deal with. Now, you're just going to have one less player complaining about it. But what happens when this offense is still an issue and then Devontae Smith starts complaining? Are you going to ship him off too? And again, I do think Devontae Smith has been a lot better about being a little quieter about his issues with the offense rather than A.J. Brown. But I have no doubt that Devontae Smith is feeling that same type of energy about the offense and how it's been over the last couple of years as A.J. He's just been a tad bit better about being a little bit more of a team guy and not necessarily taking it to the media every time he has an issue with it. But what happens when that guy ain't gone? Like, what happens when that guy that is turned into the truth teller is gone? What if Devontae Smith decides to take on that mantle as well, and he ends up being the guy that's going to be willing to air out the locker room if things aren't going the way they need it to go? That's where I think the issues come in. But just getting rid of A.J. Brown is not going to make you a better football team because he's not there no more. That's not that tight. This is not what this situation is. The Eagles are going to be a worse football team. They're going to be worse off when it comes to player-wise offensively. But that's where the biggest thing is. And then on top of the fact that their offense is still going to be an issue. Like, their offense is not going to be fixed because A.J. Brown is gone. So if you get rid of your best offensive player and then you don't fix the offensive issues that have been plaguing that team for a while with better offensive talent, How is it going to look once they're less talented and then still have the same issues? It's not going to be pretty. So I just don't know. It's a weird one, but I just do think that at least I'm happy that this whole saga will be over, because for the longest time, literally for the last 3 years, it's been, hey, are they going to keep or get rid of AJ Brown because he doesn't look happy with the offense again? Like, literally, it seems like an every week conversation throughout the NFL football season. And again, it kind of died down a little bit, not after this past season, but the season before, when the Eagles went on their run to win the Super Bowl. But like, outside of that, this has been a storyline for years about the dynamics between A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, and the organization. So, like, it's gonna be one of those things that's like, it's a weird one when something like this comes to an end, but it's needed, man. Because like this constant conversation about that whole saga is definitely very tiring in general. So I think it's gonna be. This move is long overdue for everybody involved, and I feel like it'll be a very fresh start for both AJ Brown and for both those teams involved, where one team's not going to have to deal with the diva-ness in AJ Brown anymore, and then the other team is more than happy to deal with a little bit of diva if they're getting a player of AJ Brown's caliber. All in all, I think it's a good move. Well, again, I think it depends on how much they give up and the compensation and stuff to get him. That's the part where I think it can make it a little bit iffier on how I feel about this whole thing. But I think as long as the compensation's right, I think this could be a win-win-win move for everybody. And then the last storyline that I wanted to give a little bit of talk about is the Steelers. I can only laugh because it keeps me from crying. So the news that came out today was that the Steelers still have not heard anything from Aaron Rodgers about whether he is going to come back and play for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the next season. Well, let me take a drink while I think about this. So, this is, again, I knew this was going to happen. I had a little bit of hope that potentially Aaron Rodgers would be a little bit better and be maybe a tad bit more gracious about giving the Steelers a little bit of grace of telling them whether he's going to come back or not, to kind of help them be able to plan for their future with or without him going into next season. But unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers still has that in him to where he doesn't give a fuck. And he's more than happy to let the Steelers hang on his every word and hope and pray that he will come back and be the quarterback for this team, because the Steelers can't help themselves but feel like, because Aaron Rodgers still is their best chance to be winning football games going into next year, that they are not going to make any type of backup plan to kind of protect themselves from potentially falling on their face if Aaron Rodgers just says no. And that's what pisses me off, because the Steelers for the last 2 seasons, going into last year and now coming into this year, have put all their hopes and dreams on Aaron Rodgers, a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, to hope that he comes back and is the quarterback for our football team. Last year, it worked relatively well. I'm not going to lie. He did more than I ever thought he was going to, and there was a lot of issues on this football team to where I don't think he was the main reason why the Steelers didn't get farther in the playoffs. It was our defense. And I think, all in all, I think he masked a lot of issues for our offense in the way that it was built, in the lack of talent and all of that. But he's still 42 years old. And the way I look at it is that now you've put yourself on that hook one more time, waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make his triumphant return. But there's still a chance he has a bad day one day and just says, hey, I'm done. I don't want to do this shit. And guess what happens if that happens? We have no other quarterbacks on our roster. I think it'll be Will Howard, our 6th round draft pick from last year. Again, I believe in Will Howard. I think he has a chance to be a potential NFL guy, but that still has to be proven. I'm not sitting here guaranteeing that he'll be an NFL quarterback. And then Mason Rudolph, I think he's still on our team. I think we signed him to a deal to where he's still going to be on our team. But that's our quarterback room. And having picked 21 in this year's draft with it not being a great quarterback draft at all, with only Fernando Mendoza being the best one, being worth the first round pick, and then everybody kind of having whispers about why am I forgetting the guy's name? Hold on. I have his name here. It's Ty Simpson. With Ty Simpson being like the only kind of what is the word I'm looking for? The only kind of guy holding on by the skin of his teeth to potentially being a first round draft pick himself. And there's like a lot of issues why I don't think he's really worth a first round pick. It's like that, but that's the only guy even talked about as being a potential first round pick at quarterback outside of Fernando Mendoza. So it is not a great quarterback draft, and the quarterback that would be potentially available for the Steelers, I don't even want them to take. So now, if we're waiting for Aaron Rodgers once again, man, and I'm just like, why are we putting our seasons on the line on a 42-year-old quarterback? And this would be one thing, this guy was 35 and still was like close to his prime, but like Aaron Rodgers is not that anymore. Again, he's still very good, and I think he's still probably the Steelers' best chance at winning football games next year. But I'm just like, why are we putting all the eggs in that basket? Like, that's what my issue is. And especially a 42-year-old, he can step awkwardly one day. Heck, he got hurt 2 seasons ago on like the second play of the football game for the New York Jets and popped an Achilles. Like, that's still an option for a guy of that age. He is not an Iron Man. Like, that's not going to happen. And again, the whole Tom Brady thing kind of like warped our minds into thinking that a lot of other quarterbacks can do that. But Tom Brady is a one-on-one. The fact that he was able to keep playing football till 45 years old is not for everybody. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks that's going to like break that mold like Tom Brady did. So even if he does say yes and he does come back to the Steelers, but that his season can be over just like that. One bad hit or him stepping wrong and popping an Achilles or an ACL. Like, all those things are still on the table for him, and we're staking our whole season on him. And again, even with him, I don't think we're going to go win a Super Bowl. But no, the Steelers are going to keep hanging on every word for that guy, and we're going to like put our season in the balance because of it. And that's the part that kills me. I'm just like, I'd be more than happy just to throw out Will Howard out there and say, hey, we're going to let you take your lumps. We'll figure out if you're the guy, and if you're not, we'll be a bad team. We'll have one of those top draft picks going in the next draft and have a chance to go draft our long-term quarterback. But no, that's not going to be the plan for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to hope for fucking 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers to come back and save the day. Fuck me as a Steelers fan. Like that, fuck me. Fuck me. I don't understand. I'm in such a bad space because of that. Because again, I respect the Steelers organization so much. Their don't say never mentality. They were always going to try to win. We're never going to take a year off and like hurt and like. And I think to a certain extent they feel like it's a disservice to the fans to be willing to lose for a whole season to kind of put yourself in a better position to build your team out long term. And on one hand, I can respect that. But on the other hand, based off of how the NFL structure is set up, the only way to get the players that'll change your franchise for the long term, especially at the quarterback position, is by having years where you're willing to suck, or just kind of setting it up to where you just have a bad year one year and you can go get the player that'll help reshape your franchise for the next 10 to 15 years, especially at the quarterback position. That's the only way it works. That's the only way it's been working for a long time. Name me the last quarterback that's like looked at as like an all-time great that is like outside of a first-round quarterback. It rarely happens, man. So few and far between. You're talking about the Brock Purdy being Mr. Irrelevant, becoming the quarterback he's become. But like, let's be honest. Would he work on the 31 other football teams outside of the San Francisco 49ers? I don't think he would. Who else are we thinking about here? Who else? Like Jalen Hurts being a second-round pick. Okay, fine. That's a pretty big one. He was a second-round pick, has won a Super Bowl, and been really good in another Super Bowl. But like, he's not looked at as like he's still a very good. He's much better than what we have at quarterback right now. So it's hard for me to talk a lot of shit. But like, even he isn't necessarily like a guaranteed guy. But like, what outside of that? What else? A lot of the quarterbacks that are like real guys in the NFL, they're first-round draft picks because quarterbacks, if you have any sort of real talent to you at all in general, they're pushed up to the top. Like teams are hot to go get the quarterback of their future, and they want to make sure they have as many years with that fifth-year option in the first round that you have, like, to make sure that happens. So like, and I don't think the Steelers are a team that's going to be able to like go find a gem in the draft and then build them up from the ground up. I just don't think that's what the Steelers organization is as of right now. And I don't think Mike McCarthy is going to be that coach to be able to get a quarterback and build him up that way. Again, maybe Will Howard can be that guy, but I'm like, think about the quarterbacks Mike McCarthy has dealt with. Aaron fucking Rodgers, like that was a first-round draft pick that fell to them. Like that was not a project like that. Like it was a very talented quarterback that turned into what he turned into. So don't mind me if I'm not feeling very confident that Mike McCarthy is going to be able to build up a quarterback from ground up and be able to make him a guy. Like, I'm not feeling great about it. I'm really not. So I just get real frustrated about this whole Steelers thing. So as much as I respect this organization, I love the Steelers organization. They make moves sometimes where I'm just like, it's maddening. Because I'm just sitting there like, it's so simple. One season of losing can get you everything you want and more. Just one. And I think most fans are willing to accept that. I think most fans are willing to see through the losing for one season and be like, hey, if we lose for 1 year and we can turn our franchise around and get our quarterback of the future and do what we need to do, I think they'd be more than happy to take it. But it's the fucking pride about not wanting to have losing seasons that has warped everybody's brains into like making this shit so much harder. I just don't know, man. It just sucks. It just sucks. The way they're not willing to just kind of just have one bad season. It'll do so much good. But they won't do it. Again, I respect it on one hand, but on the other, I fucking hate it. Okay. That's it for all the stories that I want to talk about in today's pod. I have a couple other things I want to talk about here. So I made a list of 10 players I already mentioned this before, but I'll talk about it again. Best fits for 10 NFL draft prospects that are coming out in this Thursday's draft, okay? I didn't want to go through a bunch of names, so I just picked 10 and kind of just thought it would be the most fun to pick those. So I just want to go through and I want to pick what I think would be the best teams for those players to go to kind of have, a best chance for them to be successful and for the team to be successful because they're there, okay? So the players I have here are Arvell Reese, linebacker / defensive end from Ohio State. I have Sonny Siles, middle linebacker from Ohio State. I have David Bailey, who is the defensive end from the Texas Tech. Jeremiah Love, the running back from Notre Dame. Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. Carnell Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State. Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver from Arizona State. Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. Ruben Bain, the defensive end from Miami. And then Denzel Boston, the wide receiver from the Saints. Again, there is one glaring omission I probably should have included, but Mekhi Lemon, he's looked at to be a mid-first round draft pick. I just don't think so, and I feel like he has so many downsides as a player. And I think the only team that I think would be a perfect fit for him would be the Rams. But they already have a player like that in Puka Nacua. Why would they pick up another player that Puka Nacua already fits the need of? Like, why would they have two? Like, wouldn't you want a different wide receiver that has a different skill set to kind of accentuate them both? That's the reason why I didn't include Mekhi Lemon in this. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to all these players that I have and get to the best, what I think are their best fits. So I'll start with Arvell Reese, who is a linebacker / defensive end. I think a lot of teams are looking at him as a potential pass rusher, get after the pass because of all the talents that he has, and he's a freaking cyborg. And this is the part that gets me real quick. The people that look at him and say, I'm not sure if he's going to translate to be a defensive end and really be able to make that transition. But here's my thing, is that even if he doesn't make the transition well and he can't be a pass rusher in the NFL, he can still be an amazing off-ball linebacker, which is what I think adds to the guy's floor, that'll still be able to give you some pass rush moments like in different defenses, right? So even if he can't be a full-time defensive end and like be what everybody thinks he could be a top defensive end one day, but at his worst, he can still be a really good middle line off-ball linebacker that can then get after the passer every once in a while. But I do think he'll be able to make the transition to defensive end I do think he'll be able to, and he's such a freak of nature. I think he'll be able to get the job done if he's just given enough reps at it. And because of that, I think his best fit will be to the Arizona Cardinals. Not only because I think it'll be a great team to kind of go to. They have an obvious need of defensive end. But I think that with the quarterbacks they'll have to go after, you're in the NFC West, you're going after Matthew Stafford, you're going after Sam Darnold, and then you're going after Brock Purdy. Those are guys that have a little bit of athleticism. At least 2 out of the 3 have a tad bit of athleticism to them. To where I think, and none of them are going to be able to get away from Arvell Reese, and I think he'll be given the spotlight to be able to be that guy. And they don't have a defensive head coaches right now. I think it's more offensive, but I think that he will have a spotlight there to go and shine right away. And as long as he keeps making the improvements he needs to become a pass rusher, I think it'll be a great fit for him to go to Arizona. On top of the fact that I know that he does have a chance to go to the Jets, but I just don't want any of these, especially the Buckeyes, to go to the Jets. That's just an awful franchise, not really ran well, and for a coach that I don't think is going to be there long term. So I don't have any of these players going to the Jets. I'm like, I don't want I wouldn't wish going to the Jets on my worst enemy. That is a terribly run organization that I just think would be a death sentence for a lot of players to go to, unless they somehow miraculously turn it around, but I just don't have a lot of confidence in that. So I'm not going to have any of these players going to the Jets. Next one, I think Sonny Styles, off-ball linebacker, I think his best fit would be going to the New York Giants. I think they have an obvious need there. I don't think they have a lot of I think they have an obvious hole at linebacker that I think he would be a very good fit with. They have a new coach in John Harbaugh that loves defense. And I think that Sonny Styles will be able to go there right away and be the leader of that defense. And I think he'll be in a big city. I think he'll have the biggest spotlight to go there and be the absolutely spectacular human and football player that he has been his whole time at Ohio State. And even before that, where everybody was raving about him being a spectacular human and football player when he was in high school, and he was like a top 5 pick, a top 5 high school football player as well. So I just think with the Giants, I think it would be a perfect fit for him defensively. He'll have a defensive-minded head coach that will allow him to go and be the leader that he's supposed to be. And he'll be on a team that'll love to accentuate all the things that he can do best. And I think he can literally absolutely do anything. He can run down your best running back. He can get after the quarterback if they get outside the pocket. He can go play in coverage and try to be in the middle of the field as well and kind of do some good things there too. So with all the skills that he has, I think the Giants will be a perfect spot for him to go and do what he needs to do in the NFL. Next one, David Bailey, defensive end from Texas Tech. I think Washington would be a perfect spot for him because they have a defensive-minded head coach. They have a obvious needed defensive end to kind of put a guy in there. And I do think David Bailey can. I don't think he necessarily has the ceiling of a guy like Arvell Reese, but I do think if he gets everything right and he has the right coaching and he can be put in a good spot, I think he can be a very, very, very good pass rusher. And I think he might actually be a little bit better from the start. I think he actually might be a better pass rusher right now because I think Arvell Reese does have a little bit of transitioning to do when it comes to trying to build the skills up. I think David Bailey's probably a little bit better. He's going to be able to start from day one a little bit faster, and I think he'll have a quicker start in the NFL. But I just think with that, I think Washington's going to be a perfect spot because they need real defensive help for that football team. And I think David Bailey will be the perfect guy able to kind of fill that need for Washington to get after the passer in that division against Dak Prescott And let's see, Dak Prescott, now Malik Willis. Nope, that's AFC East. Dak, it's why am I forgetting his name? Oh no. Dak, and then who are the 4 teams for the NFC East? It's a bad time to start forgetting teams and names all at the same time. This is awful. NFC East, Giants, which is, hold on, I suck today at remembering stuff. NFC East teams. God, Jalen Hurts, you have Dak Prescott, and you also have to deal with why am I forgetting the quarterback's name? Jackson Dart. So those are guys that he'll be able to go after, and there's going to be a real need to get after those guys. And I think David Bailey will be a perfect fit for Washington. Next one, Jeremiah Love. I think his perfect fit would probably be, I think he has a couple perfect fits where I think he would work at. I think I picked Tennessee because they already have a quarterback that I think is going to be a really, like, a long-standing quarterback, and I think will be one of the more talented guys for years to come. In Cam Ward, but I think he probably would be a great fit for potentially the Chiefs. But I think they already signed a running back, so the need's not really there. But I think Arizona would be a good fit, and I think the news is recently that the Arizona really might go ahead and take Jeremiah Love to add to that football team. They don't really have a quarterback ready to go. But I think adding Jeremiah Love and then potentially getting a quarterback next year would be a huge deal, and then have it kind of have everything around their potential next quarterback, I think would be a very good fit. But I picked Tennessee because the quarterback's already there in Tennessee, and I think that they're in need of a big weapon. I think he can be the not to mention Cam Ward, with as athletic as he is and has much of a weapon as he is with his legs as well as his arm. I think adding Jeremiah Love to that would only be a great thing, especially with the fact that he can catch the football out of the backfield. He can pass block pretty well as well. I think it's going to be it would be a great fit for him in Tennessee. I think it'd be good for everybody overall if you put with Tennessee, but I think Arizona is also a great option too. And I think as of right now, a lot of people are saying Arizona might be the spot where he ends up going, but I think Tennessee would be a good spot too. Next one, Caleb Downs. I also have him as his best fit going to the Giants because now the Giants have two first round picks that end up being in the top 10. I think there is a chance that this happens. I do think the better chances that the Giants would probably go defense with their 5th pick overall and then probably go offense with the 10th pick overall, maybe go a wide receiver or an offensive lineman or something like that. So I think that's probably more likely what they do, one defense and one offense. But if they do go 2 defensive players, and if Caleb Downs drops to them at 10, I think that would be a huge deal to add 2 great Buckeye defenders to that defense and really kind of shore up that team, that defensive side of the football overall, to help out Jackson Dart and make sure he doesn't necessarily have to start off like hot from the get-go in his second year. To have a defense be able to take a huge step forward and kind of help out Jackson Dart to where he can still go through his growing pains and kind of get better and get going with Malik Neighbors as a wide receiver 1. Because again, Jackson Dart played every play that he played last year. He didn't play with Malik Neighbors at all either. So I do think it's going to take a little time for that meshing to kind of happen between those 2 players. So if you're able to get both Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs to help shore up that defense, I think would be a huge deal towards helping them start off fast from the start in next season. But I don't know. It probably won't happen because I think the Giants might go offensive, like an offensive player with that 10th pick overall. But I do think it'd be a great fit for 2 Ohio State defenders to both go to the Giants. But I don't think it's going to happen though. But I can only dream, right? Next, Cardinal Tate. I think his best fit would probably be Kansas City. And I hate to say that because I would hate for Patrick Mahomes to get another great, a really good player to kind of add and be able to actually consistently rely on a wide receiver on a week in, week out basis. And I think that's exactly what Cardinal Tate would be for him. again, Carnell Tate is awesome. I've seen him do this stuff for years. He isn't necessarily a burner, but you don't have to be great in the NFL. And if you can kind of go from literally from day one and have one of the best quarterbacks, the best quarterback in the NFL throwing to you, I think that'll only help your transition go better and better. And I think Carnell going to Kansas City would not only would Patrick Mahomes make him great, I think having a consistent wide receiver to help out Patrick Mahomes would be a great fit as well. So I think Carnell Tate going to Kansas City would be a huge deal for him to kind of start from day one and be able to start running and do very well in the NFL. Especially with Andy Reid as your play caller, like all of those things are kind of in your favor. I think Carnell Tate would destroy over there in Kansas City. Next player I got is Jordan Tyson. I have wide receiver from from Arizona State. I have his best fit being the Rams. And I say that because I think putting him, because I know they have Devontae Smith, and he's going to be there for like the next year or two. But I think you can add him in as a potential slot receiver, or you can kind of switch them all out. I think Puka Nacua can play the slot, and he can play outside as well as Devontae Adams. And then adding him, Jordan Tyson, as a third receiver to kind of add to that rotation, and then be the heir apparent for Devontae Smith when he ends up leaving, either due to age or wanting to move on to a different team, or maybe the Rams just don't want to pay the guy anymore what they're going to end up paying. I think they're paying him a decent amount of money to be there. I think, or let's be honest, if Puka Nacua is playing around and the Rams just kind of fall out of love with Puka Nacua and don't really want to pay him big money to stay there long term, I think Jordan Tyson being there with Matthew Stafford and having a great play caller in Sean McVay would be a huge deal. And either he can be a great wide receiver one day if Puka Nacua ends up not being there long term, or he can be an awesome wide receiver two on the other side of Puka Nacua. I just think that would be a huge addition onto what Matthew Stafford is as a quarterback, and having a great downfield threat that has real speed, real burning speed to him, rather than Puka Nacua, not necessarily as fast a receiver. Again, hasn't stopped him from being one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And then Devontae Smith has never really been the fastest receiver either, but I think that he, kind of same like Puka Nacua, has just made himself a magician and just getting open and just running very good routes. But adding a guy like Jordan Tyson with the twitch and the creativity after the catch that he has would be a huge add, not to mention the fact Matthew Stafford has not lost anything on his deep balls. So being able to kind of throw over top of the defense with a guy like Jordan Tyson, with the brains of Sean McVay kind of putting things together offensively, would be a great fit, I think, for him, not only Jordan Tyson, but for the Rams, honestly. Like, that would be a much better fit than having freaking Mekhi Lemon, who was literally the exact same player as Puka Nacua, but not as good. I think it's just a lot better to kind of get a player with different skill set to kind of accentuate everybody. Next player, Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. I have his best, for me, what I think his best fit would be to Baltimore. I really do think so. I think Lamar needs another pass catcher that they can rely upon. They still have Mark Andrews as their tight end one, but I don't think he's going to be there much longer. I think like maybe a year or two more. He's already had a really good career so far, but I just think he's getting a little older. He's a little expensive. So I do think that would be nice to have another option once Mark Andrews is done. And on top of the fact that even without Mark Andrews, Baltimore loves two tight end sets, and they did lose. Why am I forgetting that tight end's name that they lost? Why am I forgetting the guy's name? I can't think of it. Baltimore tight end left in free agency. Who? I forget his name. Signed. relinquished. Haha. It was Isaiah Likely. He was their tight end too for so long, and he was such a big weapon for that Baltimore offense out on the other side of Andrews. And even when Mark Andrews get hurt, they literally would just put in Isaiah Likely, and he would be just as explosive and a really good downfield threat from the tight end position. So I think being able to add a guy like Kenyon Sadiq to that offense, not only while they still have Mark Andrews, but to be the heir apparent to Mark Andrews once he is done, I think would be a huge addition to that Baltimore offense. And again, I hate to say that because I think that would only make my job as a Steelers fan much like having to watch the Steelers play against them twice a year would be much harder, because I think Kenyon Sadiq is a big play receiver, big play tight end ready to happen. Again, do I think he'll be as good as a Brock Bowers from day one like Brock Bowers has been for the Raiders? No, probably not. But I do think, because I just think Kenyon Sadiq would be a huge matchup issue for any defense that he plays. And being able to add him to be a big weapon for Lamar Jackson in that Baltimore offense would be huge for any defense. Like, they would stay up at night having to worry about Kenyon Sadiq and not giving up the big play to him. So he's just a matchup nightmare. I think he'd be great with Baltimore. Next player I have is Ruben Bain. I think his best fit would be with the Dallas Cowboys. I just think that from what he did at Miami from the defensive end position, he was a hellraiser. And even with the short arms, which I do think is a issue for that position specifically, but I just think that he proved in the college football that he just had the motor that made sure that didn't matter. And I think that as long as he can translate that to the NFL and kind of keep doing what he's doing, I think he'll be able to be a really good pass rusher in the NFL as well, even if I do have those issues with the length of his arms, and heck, the rest of the industry does as well. But everything that anybody says about him is about the motor that he has, and how I think with the talent that he does possess and the strength that he has, is that he'll be able to get through that. And with that, I think Dallas is a really good fit for him, because they have a real need for pass rushers, especially from the defensive end spot. And I think he'd be able to literally plop in from day one and be able to cause some real hell for all the offenses the Cowboys are going to have to face. And let's be honest, the Cowboys defense was their biggest issue last year. And being able to add a pass rusher to kind of get after the quarterback would be a huge help to not giving up a ton of points like they did last year. So I think that would be a very good fit for Ruben Bain and for the Dallas Cowboys. And then last but not least, I put Denzel Boston as like the last one I want to make a fit for. I think he'd be a great fit for the Saints. I know that they have a top 10 pick, and I think that maybe they have a real chance to go pick one of those other wide receivers that I've already talked about, either Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson. Maybe they have an opportunity to take one of those guys when they have their pick in the top 10. But, because I have both those guys going to different, potentially great fits for different teams, I think Denzel Boston, being the big-bodied wide receiver that he is, I think he'd be a great fit for the Saints offense. They have their quarterback, I believe, in Tyler Shuck. They have a wide receiver one in Chris Olave. And they have a real opening at wide receiver 2 on the other side of him. And I think Denzel Boston, being a big body wide receiver that still has some really good speed, I think would be a very good complement to what Chris Olave is. And heck, even if Chris Olave can't be a number one wide receiver for them long term, and Denzel Boston takes that spot, that makes Chris Olave a great wide receiver too to put on the other side of Denzel Boston. I feel like those two kind of skill sets really do kind of play off each other very well. And especially now that they have a quarterback I think they can really believe in Shuck, I think that would be a very good fit for Denzel Boston. I really do. And I just feel like that would be a very good fit for both the Saints, who definitely need more pass catchers since they traded away. Who was it they traded away? It was... What was his name? Why am I forgetting his name now? He went to the... They traded him to Seattle, right? Rashid Shaheed. Yes. They traded away Rashid Shaheed to Seattle in the middle of the season. Again, good for him. He ended up going to win a Super Bowl. But that leaves a real opening on the other side of Chris Olave, and I think Denzel Boston will be a pretty good fit there. So those are the 10 players that I picked in order to do the best fits that I think would work for all of those players. I think that's a pretty good list. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm a draft expert or anything, but I listen to a lot of things, and I do a lot of research myself, and I feel like I just have so much fun doing this draft stuff, and I'm so excited for this Thursday's draft. Even if it doesn't really have like a lot of the crazy quarterback names to rely upon or anything, I'm gonna have so much fun watching it. And I'm a guy that watches the first round. Literally, I will watch the whole first round no matter how long it takes. I'll watch day 2 on Friday, both the second and third round. I'll watch all of that as well. And heck, going into Saturday when they do the 4th through 7th round picks, I'll keep track. I'm not sitting here watching on television, just watching all the picks go through. I'll probably do some other stuff, but I'll have it playing on in the background. I'll have it on my phone. I'll be keeping track because I not only want to see what the Steelers do, but I love watching the rest of the teams make their moves as well. And there's like so much movement and trades and all of that. I have so much fun watching it all. And again, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably feel the same way. So I can't wait for the draft to happen. I know you guys can't wait either. And I just can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be a lot of fun watching this draft this year because there's not a lot of like guarantees in this draft. I feel like it makes it that much crazier because you just don't know where things are going to go. It just makes it, there's a real chance for so many other things to happen and like kind of change the way the trajectory of this draft is going to go. I'm just very excited for the unknown in this one. I really am. All right. So now that I'm done talking about all the NFL and all the draft stuff I wanted to talk about, let me get to some of the NBA topics I wanted to talk about here. Because it just is what it is. NBA playoffs are here, and let me start with this by talking about the LaMelo Ball of it all, right? So early last week, if not late in the week, the week before, right? You have the play-in stuff happening, where that whole thing is happening between the 7, 8, 9, and 10. And they're kind of playing through and all of that, and let me see. For the Eastern side, it was the Hornets in that first game. It was the Hornets playing the. Hold on, let me get to it. Let me see here. So the playing games were. Let's see here. Orlando and Philadelphia that was the 7-8 in the Western Conference, and then it was the Golden State and the Clippers in the 9 and 10, right? So before I get to LaMelo Ball, I'll talk about those two games. I don't really want to take long on any of these because I kind of I want to talk about the actual playoffs that are happening right now. Orlando and Philadelphia. Philadelphia destroyed Orlando. Orlando didn't look great in that first game. Paolo Banchero didn't play great. And it was one of those things where, like, does Orlando even want to be here because of how bad they played? And this is on top of the fact that Orlando lost their very last game of their season to where they could have not been in the play-in at all. And they lost that game and kind of got knocked down to having to play in this play-in in general, especially when most of the season Orlando looked very good and Paolo looked like was playing much better basketball. And in that game against Philadelphia, it just did not look that way, and Paolo didn't look great, and the offense didn't look good at all. So it definitely changed up how everybody was thinking about Orlando. It was like, hey, can they get knocked out of those playoffs altogether because of how bad they're playing and how bad Paolo looked? And Philadelphia played great. Tyrese Maxey did what they had to do, but it just felt like Orlando was definitely not playing up to what they were supposed to be, right? In that second game, the second play-in game for Golden State and the Clippers, Golden State had an awesome night. I think that was like the last game we'll probably see of Steph Curry, Draymond, and Steve Kerr all together. There was news coming out of that may be Steve Kerr's last game coaching for the Golden State Warriors, and who knows what's going to happen after this season, because Curry played awesome. I think he had like 35 in that game, and he was hitting three. I think he had like 7 threes in that game. He was playing great. It was really throwback Steph Curry. And I have to give Draymond a little bit of credit here too, is that he turned back the clock as well, and he really locked down Kawhi in that late third in the fourth quarter, to where Kawhi was sitting at like 19 points by the end of the game, and he had 19 points through like 3 quarters, and then like 3.5 quarters. Sorry. Yeah. And then Draymond said, no, you're not getting any more. And Draymond really did lock up Kawhi. And Kawhi had been playing his best basketball he's played in years. So I have to give a lot of credit to both Draymond and Steph Curry for really turning back the clock and like really showing this sounds really cheesy when you say it, but like heart of a champion. And Steph Curry and Draymond really did show that, and like they showed out in that game and knocked the Clippers out of the playoffs. And Golden State just played awesome. And it really did give like the Steph Curry. It really did reaffirm how much Steph Curry is like amongst all the players in the NBA right now. If you had to pick a player, if you had to like say, hey, if I have one ticket I want to go buy to watch this player play at their best, Steph Curry's that one because he just plays so different. And watching him shoot the threes that he shoots and how magical it looks, it is like the hottest ticket I can think of buying right now amongst all the NBA players going. And maybe Wemby would be pretty high up there because of how much of an alien that he is. But Steph Curry, man, it just looks different when he's playing at a high level, and he showed that in that game against the Clippers. And it really did give like people like a little bit of nostalgia for like how great Golden State was at its best and how great Steph Curry can still be. Again, he's 38 years old, so it's not like he can do that all the time, but when he does access it, he can look as great. He can literally look like he has played his best basketball yet. But it was a very fun game watching them kind of knock out the Clippers from the playoff play-ins altogether. And then on the Eastern side, the 7-8 game was Charlotte and Orlando. No, because the game before that was the 9-10 games, right? Yeah, Charlotte and Miami was the 9 and 10 game. Miami playing at Charlotte, right? Sorry, I messed up on that whole thing. But the 9-10 game for the Eastern Conference was Charlotte and Miami, okay? And this is the game that kind of started off a whole bunch of madness based off how this game went. Charlotte, I think for the last half of this season, I found Charlotte to be a very fun team to watch play on a night-in, night-out basis. They shoot a bunch of threes. LaMelo Ball, as much as he looks so, I'm not going to say carefree, he looks like nonchalant playing basketball out there. He doesn't really focus on defense a lot. He shoots a lot of threes off one foot. He is not a very serious player, and I think I feel like that's a very safe thing to say because of how he's been throughout his NBA career so far, 6 years in. Been very unserious, doesn't really make a lot of winning plays all the time. But I just think that adding Concanipple, who's such a great buttoned-up player, and who am I forgetting the other player's name? The other player on their squad. I'm forgetting. Hold on here. I'm trying to remember who the Brandon Miller, who is another good player. I think he's a potential all-star at some point. Another great offensive player that is like it's a good all-around NBA player. Those three together, especially in the second half of the year, were playing very good basketball. And very fun basketball to watch in game. And now getting this game in Miami where I'm like, okay, I want to watch Miami and them play. I was rooting for Charlotte because I'm like, Charlotte's just a very fun team to watch. And as much as I think Miami has like a team that's like just knows how to win basketball games, they play very smart, but it's just like, it's not as fun watching them as Charlotte. So I went into that game like, hey, I want to see Charlotte win, and maybe if they can go on a run here, maybe they can just play some really good playoff basketball, and I can just have fun watching them, right? And either you have this game play out, and very early on in the game, I think it was like in this first quarter or something like that, LaMelo Ball goes down, thinks he gets hit in the head, and then kind of comes up and grabs Bam's ankle and kind of whips, takes Bam's feet out from under him, and he ends up getting hurt, and Bam actually ends up leaving the game and not playing the rest of the game, but I think it had like a back injury or something like that based off LaMelo doing it. And it was very obvious LaMelo did it on purpose. And after the game, they asked him about it, and he kind of played it off like, oh, I got hit in the head, and I didn't know what I was doing and all that. But I think it was very obvious that LaMelo Ball did what he did, and he knew what he was doing by taking Bam's feet out from under him. And it just kind of gives another reason for people to not like LaMelo Ball because he's been such an unserious player throughout his NBA career so far. But even being as unserious as he is, he's still a very fun player to watch. And when it comes to talent, he has all of it. He's a very good passer. He can shoot. He can has length. Like, when it comes to being as unserious as he is on the basketball court, he shouldn't be, because when it comes to the talents that he has the talent. He has the length. He can shoot. Like, he has everything you need to be a very good player in the NBA. If not, potentially a Hall of Famer one day, if he does the things he needs to do to get there, right? But he hasn't really made that. He really hasn't really made that a reality up to this point in his career. And now doing that with Bam and hurting him and taking him out of the game by doing what he did, it just gave a lot of more reasons to kind of hate on Ball. And it's just like, he kind of earned it, right? And that's the part that kills me with it, because I'm sitting there like, even after that, because after that, he missed a bunch of threes in that game. He was taking terrible shots. And with how good the rest of Charlotte's team was playing, when it came to, why am I forgetting names here? In that game, Knippel didn't do anything in that game. He scored 6 points. He was 2 for 12 from the floor. But you had guys like Brandon Miller play very well. He had 23 points. And then Diabate, their center, had 14 rebounds. And Kobe White had an amazing game. He had 19 points, 5 of 8 from 3, including like a game tying 3 at the end of the game to take it to overtime. And even with all the madness in that game where LaMelo Ball didn't shoot the ball that well, he went 2 of 16 from 3. I think that's the record for most 3-pointers missed in a playoff game in NBA history. And he still had 30 points, though, with all of that being the case. He still had 30 points, and he's hit the game-winning shot at the end of overtime. But that was on the heels of him making a dumb play and getting the ball turned over and allowing Miami to hit what was it? He ended up hitting a 3 to lead to take the lead. And then, he fouled Tyler Hero on a 3-point attempt to allow Hero to go to the line and hit a couple free throws to take the lead, to where then LaMelo had to come back and hit the 2-pointer to win the game. So it's just like all these things, and it's just such unserious basketball. But at the end of the day, it's still very fun to watch. And I'm sitting there like, I was happy that LaMelo Ball made the plays ended up making the play to win the game, even if he made so many bad ones to get them to a point where they were going to potentially lose it. And people called him a clown after that on television and all that, Nick Wright. And I feel like clown is a potential something that he has earned, even though I think it's a little harsh. But I think that he's made it very unclear. He made it very clear he has not been a serious player throughout his NBA career so far. And in that game, he was unserious of a player, and he hurt one of the more liked players in the NBA in Bam Adebayo by doing something very dirty looking in general, right? And coming out of that game, there was all the talk about whether he was dirty and whether he should get suspended or fined and all that. He ended up just getting fined, but I was really hoping coming off of that he would just get the point and play a lot better, and have to play just a little bit better, get a chance to, even through all that, I still want him to have the chance to have the taste of playing high leverage basketball, to where maybe it'll make him want to become a more serious player, because he's tasted what real basketball, real stakes is like, and maybe he'll want to make a change to kind of be able to do that a lot more often. So before I get to what happened in the next round of that play-in, the 7-8 game on the west side, it was Portland and Phoenix playing. Portland beat Phoenix in that first play-in game, and I think it was Denny Advija who had 41 points in that game. He's a bucket, man, and he was awesome, and he outplayed everybody on that Phoenix squad, and he played very good. But yeah, that game it was competitive, but it was actually both of those games were very good, and I feel like did give the play-in a little bit of juice, because honestly, up to this point, it wasn't a lot of very competitive games happening in the play-in. But then, all these play-in games, you had 3 very competitive games in general, right? So I think Adam Silver, when he looked at these play-in games this year, ended up being very good matchups that had some very good, compelling basketball to watch. So I do think the play-in ended up being a very good product this year in comparison to past years where it wasn't a lot of competitive basketball being played amongst the 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds trying to vie in to get into the playoffs. So then getting the next round of the play-in, you had Charlotte playing Orlando. Charlotte got blown out. The game wasn't competitive, and it just kind of sucks. LaMelo Ball didn't play well, and he was there's a lot of turnovers. I think they had like 20-something turnovers in this game. It was just very obvious that the Hornets were not good enough as a basketball team against Orlando Magic, and Paolo Banchero, coming off that first game in the play-in where he did not play all that well, came into this game very serious, and they just came in and took care of business from literally from the start of the game on, and Charlotte just could not get out of the hole that they kind of dug themselves in. Orlando, it was the first quarter, Orlando had 38 points to Charlotte 16, and it was just Orlando never looked back. And Orlando was a better basketball team that day, and it wasn't a competitive game whatsoever. But I hope for LaMelo Ball's sake and for that Charlotte team's sake that LaMelo learns to grow up on the basketball court, because if he does and make some real strides on kind of tapping into that talent that he has, I think Charlotte can be a very viable, like, competitive team from here on out. I really do think so. But it's just until he does that, or until he ends up going somewhere else and they get somebody else for him, they're never going to reach that height. But I do think LaMelo Ball does have real talent inside of him. I just think he needs to access that and to grow up a little bit. And I do think they can make some real strides as a basketball team if he kind of takes those next steps in growing up on the basketball court. And then in the 8th seed game between Golden State and Phoenix, it seemed like Golden State kind of shot their last shot in that game against the Clippers. And just Phoenix kind of came out there, bullied them. Game wasn't close. Jalen Green was awesome and had like 36 points. Like, Phoenix just was a better basketball team. Golden State has kind of been flying on by the seat of their pants all year long, and they had that one last kind of hurrah from Steph Curry, but he just wasn't able to kind of put on the same type of effort to kind of get them to a point where they could have a chance to win this basketball game against Phoenix. But, you know, and I think after that game, Steph, Draymond, and Steve Kerr kind of came together and kind of like thanked each other, and it was a kind of like a kumbaya moment where Steve Kerr's like, I'm not sure what's going to happen after this, but he said, I love you guys and all that. Yeah, I appreciate you. And it kind of made it seem like there was a chance Steve Kerr won't be their coach long term. And on top of that, who knows what the future holds for a guy like Draymond, if he's going to be with Golden State long term, or even Steph. Like, again, maybe Steph wants to go somewhere else, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Steph's going to be a one jersey type of guy. I think Golden State's going to make sure of that. So, like, it seemed like an end of an era when it comes to the Golden State Warriors and Steph, Draymond, and Steve Kerr. That part kind of sucked. But I think when it came to the basketball, I just feel like it was right that Phoenix beat them in that game. It was. It was how it needed to go. So, from there, you go into the actual playoffs that have happened so far. I think there's been one game for each matchup so far. And then you have 3 games happening today that are like the second games of those matchups. And I just want to kind of give a little bit of thought to these real quick before I get out of here. You have the games that happened on Saturday. You had Toronto and playing at Cleveland. Cleveland won that game 126-113. I think Cleveland's just a better basketball team. You had decent play from James Harden in the playoff, which is kind of surprising for me to see. He played very well. But I think overall, Donovan Mitchell really was the engine for that Cleveland team. And I think that Toronto just doesn't have the talent to be able to match up with Cleveland and play with them on a game in, game out basis. I'm not sitting here saying that game's going to go 4 or 5 or anything like that. I think Toronto can make things tough because of their length, but I just don't think they have the offensive firepower to keep up with Cleveland for a whole series. So I do think Cleveland's probably going to win that series. And I think it kind of showed that how different those two teams are between them. Even with Cleveland not necessarily playing the greatest of defense, I just don't think Toronto's going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think Cleveland's probably going to be able to win that series. Even if Toronto can make it a little tough and maybe win a game or two to make the series a little bit longer than probably it should be. That next game on Saturday was Minnesota at Denver. You had Denver winning that game 116-105. That game wasn't all that competitive. I think Denver took control of that game very early on. And as much as every time Minnesota felt like they were trying to get back into it and kind of like really try to score and get back in it, Denver just made another run. Jokic had a triple-double in that game. Jamal Murray had 30 points in that game. And it just feels like if Anthony Edwards is not going to play otherworldly type of basketball, I just don't think Minnesota has the horses to keep up with the way that Jokic is playing right now on top of Murray. And I think this Denver team, I think, is the best it's been ever since their championship. I think this team is better than the team that won the championship because they have so many different guys around Jokic to shoot the basketball and play some really good defense. And Aaron Gordon is back and playing good basketball as well. So like I said, if Anthony Edwards is not going to turn into the next Michael Jordan and come out and just like play with his hair on fire and play like the best player in basketball, I just don't think Minnesota has enough to deal with what Denver is as of right now. On top of the fact that, the other guys that Edwards has around him didn't really play that well in that first game either. Randall didn't play all that great, and Rudy Gobert actually played some pretty decent minutes for them. But again, he just can't keep up with Jokic, man. And I just don't think they have an answer for the way Jokic plays and runs that Denver offense. So I think all in all, Denver's probably going to win this series in 6, if I had to guess. I just don't think they're going to have a lot of issues because I think Denver with Jokic is playing very good basketball right now, and they are a real problem for a lot of teams in the West. I think anybody other than, I think Denver does have a little bit of an Oklahoma City issue, and I do think that's going to be an issue for Denver if they end up meeting Oklahoma City, because I think Oklahoma City knows how to play them, and I think they're a real matchup issue for them. But outside of that, Denver is probably the best team in the West outside of them, because I just don't think the San Antonio and Wemby has enough to beat them in a 7-game series as of right now. Again, that probably will change here in the next couple of years, but as of right now, I think Denver would beat San Antonio in a 7-game series. So I think Denver is probably the second best team in the West as of right now, at least left in the playoffs, of course. The next game that happened on Saturday was Atlanta and the New York Knicks. New York Knicks won that game 113-102. It was pretty competitive throughout it until the New York Knicks kind of pulled away there in the second half. But I think this is going to be a competitive series, honestly. I think as long as Jalen Johnson, right? That's who it is. Yeah, if Jalen Johnson can kind of figure things out and kind of be the dominant player that he's been with the Hawks all season long, I do think if he turns it on, he can make this Atlanta Hawks team an issue for the Knicks in a 7-game series. But until then, the Knicks just have a little bit too much when it comes to Jalen Brunson. I think the game slows down to where Brunson can kind of take over the game a little bit more often than he can in the regular season. And the Knicks have a lot of size. And heck, let's be honest, the Knicks won that game and Cat really didn't play all that well. So if Cat can kind of figure things out and kind of get jumped back in and play some decent basketball, I think that puts the Knicks even that much more ahead of the Hawks. But, I think the Knicks are probably the much better team. And even though I think Jalen Johnson and the Hawks can make it a little bit more competitive, I think I probably lean towards the Knicks kind of finishing off that series in like 5 or 6 if the Hawks can't kind of figure some things out. And then the last game on Saturday, it was Houston at the LA Lakers. And this game was a little bit weird because going into it, I think most teams kind of looked at it as like LeBron's by himself. There's no Luka, no why am I no. Why am I getting his name now? Austin Reeves. And no, those two players, they're literally 2 of their top 3 players are not there for the LA Lakers. And Houston's coming in. They've been playing a lot better as of recently. KD's been playing on a tear. And everybody's like, okay, well, if the Lakers don't have everybody they don't have Luka, their best player. They don't have Austin Reeves, their third best player on that team. So how are the Lakers going to be able to win this series without those 2 players? And then the first thing that right before this game, it is announced that KD can't play the first game because he hit his knee in practice a couple days prior, and he wasn't able to go in this game and be able to play healthy, at least what Houston said. And the Lakers went out and won that game 107-98 from Houston, right? Powered by Luke Kennard having 27 points. And LeBron didn't even have to play all that well for the Lakers to win. But here's the thing. Houston without KD, they really don't have any sort of identity offensively. And I just think that even without KD in that game, the game was a lot closer than it should have been. If you have LeBron as the best player on that floor with the rest of the LA Lakers, the game was still very close, much closer than what everybody thought it would be without KD in there. And I don't know, man. Again, if the Houston can't get KD back in the next game or two, I think this does make this series a lot more interesting. But if they can manage to get KD back and he can be relatively healthy and play well, I think Houston should be able to win this series. But the longer this goes, if Houston won't have KD, it'll make it more and more likely that a guy like Luka can potentially make a return in this series. The series goes 5, 6, 7 games. And Austin Reeves as well. I think both of those guys could potentially have a chance to come back and be able to play. Again, how effective they'll be, I don't know. But if KD can't come back at all, that makes to where this LA Lakers team has a real chance to win this series. Or if KD can only come back for starting game 3, and it's tied 1-1, and this series really can go long term into the 7 games, it makes it more and more likely that LeBron will be able to have some real reinforcements from either Luka or Austin Reeves. So what this series looked like it was going to be a pretty easy one for Houston, either 5 or 6, can potentially be a much different issue if KD can't come back sooner rather than later. I still would probably pick Houston because I do think hopefully KD will be able to come back in game 2 or game 3. But it's just the longer this goes, the more likely the LeBron will be able to get some reinforcements, and that will not bode well for Houston at all. And then the games that happened on Sunday, I will go through those real quick, and then we'll get out of here. Philadelphia and Boston. Boston won that game running away, 123-91. This game wasn't close whatsoever. Boston destroyed Philadelphia, and I just don't think Philadelphia has a real chance to kind of make this up unless Joel Embiid can come back. I think he hasn't played. He was playing there at the end of the season and playing well. Then he ended up having to get an appendectomy like a week or two ago, to where they're not sure when he'll be able to come back, and if he does come back, whether he'll be able to play real minutes. So without Joel Embiid playing with them and kind of evening out the score when it comes to how evening out the game for talent, I just don't think Philadelphia has a real chance to win this series against Boston, man, the way that played out yesterday. Jaylen Brown was awesome. Jason Tatum coming back from the Achilles injury has been awesome. And both those players, I think Jaylen Brown having to play most of the season without Jason Tatum might have been the best thing for Jaylen Brown possible, because he has had to figure out how to be the number one option for this team. And it has made him kind of shore up some of the weaknesses in his game, because he has had no running mate to kind of help him carry the team for most of the year. I think he had to kind of work through some of those issues he had in his game. And because of that, and then now you get Jason Tatum back, even if Tatum isn't necessarily the most healthy and all the way at 100%, it makes the Celtics seem so scary. And I think they're a better team than what they were last year, because I think the guys outside of Tatum and Brown have gotten better. They have so many better role players than what they've had previously. They have so many guys that shoot the basketball. They all know what their roles are, and they all kind of live up to the moment. I think they're kind of they're built a lot like OKC, man. It's just everybody plays their role the way they need to. And it looks a little different when they're out there playing in comparison to OKC, but I feel like the philosophy and the way they have their teams built is pretty similar. It's just they're so deep. There's so many different players that have to play a specific role, and they all know what it is. And they go out there and play hard, and they play very good defense, and they shoot well. That's very hard to play against, and I don't think the Philadelphia 76ers have a real chance to win this series without Joel Embiid. So I think this series might only be 4 games. I think this was of the first round matchups, this was the most not the most lopsided game. This is the second most lopsided game in this whole first round, first games. Like, the Boston is just a much better team than Philadelphia right now. Next one, Phoenix and Oklahoma City on Sunday. This game was the most lopsided of all the first games of this first round. OKC won the series 119-84. This game was not close. Shea didn't even play all that great. And Phoenix just did not have an answer for how physical the Oklahoma City defense was. And let me tell you, it was annoying to watch at times because of how much Lou Dort was playing. And again, I'm not trying to be mean to Lou Dort, but he plays basketball like a football player. They throw him out there to be the most physical guy possible, and they're going to force those officials to make calls and make them have to play less physical. And it does annoy me a bit when they do that, because I think with OKC having their best player in Shea kind of be the guy that's extorting the rules, and he's kind of like, he's doing the James Harden thing and like trying to get fouls and knowing how to play perfectly. Again, I have respect for him. He's still a great player even without being able to hunt foul bait, but he does that all the time. And then you have a player like Lou Dort who was literally playing basketball like a football player out there, and he's fouling all the freaking time. And you see him doing that to Booker or to anybody else he's playing defense against. It just makes it a tad bit annoying, but is because the lack of physicality that the Phoenix Suns have, Booker and that the rest of that team just cannot deal with the physicality that OKC has. And I think because of that, Phoenix can't run a good offensive. They can't have a good offensive system to run through that defense that OKC has. And I think without that, I just don't think Phoenix has a real chance. I think this is 4 games and out, man, for the Phoenix Suns. OKC is just a much better basketball team than Phoenix right now, and I think the defense that OKC comes out with, I just don't think Phoenix has anything to combat that, and that's going to be a real issue for the Phoenix Suns. I just don't think they're going to be able to win this series, not win a game, let alone the series. Next game yesterday was Orlando at Detroit. Orlando won the series, won the first game 112-101. This was another not really competitive basketball game whatsoever. It was less competitive than the score kind of says that it is. Orlando only won by 11, but again, the game just did not seem all that competitive. I just think that the issue with the Pistons, they're the number 1 seed overall, kind of coming in and having to face Orlando. My problem with the Pistons is that they are so Cade Cunningham centric. If Cade is not scoring the points, they really don't have anybody to rely upon to score outside of him. And I think because of all the different options that Orlando has offensively to score, they have Paolo, they have Desmond Bane, they have Wendell Carter, they have some like Franz Wagner to go out there and play. Like Jalen Suggs can hit some threes and like run the offense when necessary. They just have so many options to score that Detroit does not have. And on top of the fact that Detroit can't bully Orlando because Orlando is just as big as Detroit, if not bigger at certain spots. So the way Detroit plays is they're trying to let Cade Cunningham go out there and score all the points, and then they're just going to play super physical defensively and make it to where your team can't play their best ball. But Orlando's just as big, if not bigger, than Detroit, so that physicality is not going to bother them. And because of that kind of physicality kind of evening out between the two teams, if not kind of favoring Orlando, the offensive skill that Orlando has that Detroit doesn't have makes it that much more apparent. And I think Detroit, being the number 1 seed overall, playing so well throughout the year, this series is a super bad matchup for them. And I think Orlando actually might win this series overall. I'm not going to sit here and guaranteed as of yet, because I do think Detroit can kind of counterpunch and kind of figure some things out. But it's going to be hard for them to kind of figure out who's going to be another scorer on that team, because they really haven't had one all year long. So I just don't know. I'm still slightly favoring Orlando to win this series, even though I think I'm not sure Orlando is as good of a basketball team as Detroit, but I just feel like all the strengths that Detroit has as a team, Orlando is perfectly kind of built to match up against. And that's the part that sucks about it. Because Cade is an awesome player. He's great. He's playing very good ball, but it's just they just need more options outside of him to help score, and they just don't have it as of right now. I think that's going to be their undoing in this series. And then last but not least, this is the last game last night, Portland at San Antonio. San Antonio won the game 111-98. This game wasn't all that competitive for the most part. Wemby went for 35. Castle played well. De'Aaron Fox played great in this game as well. And when they have all three of those guys playing great ball, you had Vassell, another player for San Antonio, playing good. They just have so many other guys that can come in to play some good minutes. Let's just say this: Victor Wembanyama only played 33 minutes. He didn't have to. They were resting him so much in this game because of how much Portland just did not have the guys, especially offensively, that can play with San Antonio, man. Portland's best player is Deni Avdija, and he is awesome. He had 30 points in this game, but outside of him, they had nobody else that was really helping score throughout this game. Scoot Henderson was the next closest thing. He had 18 points, but that's just not enough. Especially when you have Victor getting 35 points, and then he went 5 of 6 from 3. So not only did he have the defensive outing that he had, but he came out and he scored a lot too. And I just don't think San Antonio has the horses to deal. Not to mention, not even the horses. It's not even just about talent. It's about the matchup itself. And I just don't think they have enough to make Wemby uncomfortable to be able to have him not play at his best. And with that being the case, without Portland having an answer for Wemby, I just don't think they're going to be able to win this series whatsoever. This series might go 4 games, honestly. 5 tops, really. That's the way I kind of saw with that game playing out last night. And I don't know, man. It's just San Antonio's a much better basketball team as of right now. Avdija is awesome. But I just don't think I don't think Portland has the guys to match up with San Antonio right now. And I think San Antonio is going to have a very easy series, whether this series goes 4 or 5. So I think San Antonio is going to be able to take care of this series without much of an issue here. And those were all the games that happened both Saturday and Sunday. There are games going on right now because, again, I am podcasting here. It's 9:16 at night. So there's 2 games actually going on. So you have the Cavs and Raptors playing right now. You have they're currently up. Cavs are 97-86. They look like they're on their way to winning this series with a pretty hefty lead with about 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Again, like I said, I think the Cavs just have too much offense for the Raptors. And then you have the Hawks and Knicks playing right now. That game is pretty close. Knicks are up 49-48 with 3 minutes left in the 3 minutes left in the second quarter. So that one still has to play out. There's still a lot of ball to play. So I'm not going to say so that one can go either way. And then you have the last game night being the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. Those two teams are duking it out at 10:30 tonight. So that one's going to be a very good one, even though I think Nuggets probably win it. Maybe Anthony Edwards comes out and has a little bit more fire under him offensively that'll help keep this game a little bit closer than the first one was. But again, I do probably lean towards the Nuggets winning that one. So those are the 3 games that are going on as of today. And that's all I got, man. So I do intend on doing another podcast with both me and Jason, kind of reacting to the draft, probably either Friday or Saturday. So stay tuned for that. We're going to make sure we get another pod out this week. It'll be mostly the draft. Maybe if something crazy happens in the NBA playoffs, I'll talk about that. But when I get Jason on the podcast, he's not a big basketball guy. So if it's not something absolutely amazing to talk about, it can't be Wemby or KD included because he goes insane whenever I mention those guys. I don't think I'll be able to mention a lot of basketball. So I think it'll be mostly NBA NFL draft based when we do another podcast later on this week. So we do intend on doing that one, so stay tuned for that. But outside of that, I don't really have anything else to talk about. And I know I've been going for over 2 hours now, so I don't want to kind of make this go any longer than it has to. So I know this has probably been way longer than it's supposed to be. But again, I'm glad I got the football stuff out first. So if you guys kind of tuned out the basketball stuff, I totally understand if you're not really into basketball. So that's about it for me. So let's go ahead and end this podcast out here. If you've been listening for a while, we appreciate you. If you're just now jumping on, hopefully you like us and enjoy us enough to join us on this ride of listen to us talk about sports in the dumbest way possible. If this is the first pod you've listened to, make sure you go listen to a different podcast with both me and Jason here to kind of get a better idea of what our podcast is at its best. So make sure you go do that for us. We definitely appreciate that. And if you do go listen to everything, you want to kind of help us on, join us on this ride, we'd appreciate if you could do a couple things for us. If you could, like our podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to us. We're pretty much available on all audio platforms out there. We've been getting a bunch of downloads lately, so we definitely appreciate it, and just keep doing that for us. We love if you guys can do that. If you guys could also share our podcast with friends, family, enemies, anybody you feel like could enjoy the podcast we put out on a weekly basis for the most part, and then 2 times a week during football season. We would love if you can do that. And then last but not least, if you could follow us on Twitter and or X, whatever you'd like to call it, at JB Sports Pod is the podcast handle. At Javante Boozer is my handle. And then at Jace Boozer 1 is Jace's handle. And that is about it. So I'll end the podcast here, guys. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for always listening. Have a great day. Have a great night. And we will see you guys later on this week. Goodbye, y'all.